My name is Julian Cross Mercer, and what I'm about to share is the hardest chapter of my life. The day my grandfather was buried, my father inherited $420 million. And with it, he shattered me. He told me straight to my face, "You mean nothing now." That same night, he forced me out of the only home I'd ever known. What he didn't realize was that his cruelty would trigger a chain of events that exposed everything he feared most. But before I open this story, do me one favor. Tap subscribe and drop a quick comment with where you're listening from. Every message reminds me I'm not alone, and it gives me the strength to share more of these true-style journeys. The rain wouldn't stop that afternoon. It slid across the tall windows of St. Matthew's Chapel, bending the painted figures until they looked as though they were crying. I sat in the last row, gripping the program with Harold Mercer's picture printed across the front. His calm smile seemed to say he'd planned for every storm. When the organ's low notes echoed through the vaulted ceiling, I told myself to stay steady. Then my father, Victor Mercer, walked up to the pulpit. The fresh heir to Harold's fortune looked like a king stepping onto his throne. His words were polished, promising generosity and a bright future for Fairmont. But through all his talk of legacy, not once did my name pass his lips. My stomach knotted. I thought of Harold years ago at the Fairmont Artisan Fair, his hand on my shoulder as he told me, "True wealth is measured by how much it uplifts the forgotten." My father's speech made that wisdom sound like a cruel joke. By evening, the Mercer estate was alive with music and glowing firelight. Glasses of cognac clinked as visitors praised Victor, surrounding him like moths to a flame. I wandered past them, invisible in my own home. That's when Rosa, our longtime housekeeper, brushed past me, in a Lowe's. A whisper, she warned, "Your grandfather hid certain things in the study room. Don't let them sweep it away." Her words cut through the noise like a hidden note slipped into my hand. I went straight to the study, but the door was already locked under Victor's orders. I placed my palm against the wood, silently promising Harold I'd return, through truth, not desperation. When I turned, Victor was there, the public smile gone, his eyes sharp as blades. "Do you know why I left your name out?" he asked. He didn't wait for my answer. "Because you're worthless. A dreamer. Dead weight." His breath reeked of whiskey as he leaned closer. "Early tomorrow, I want you gone. Out of this house. Out of my way." Something inside me broke, but instead of collapsing, it felt like waking up from a long lie. I carried a crate of Harold's ledgers down the wide staircase, each step heavier than the last. Outside, the family crest carved in stone glistened under the rain. The only thing my father had ever given me was a gold-plated pocket watch, which felt less like a gift and more like a shackle. I started the car with the crate beside me, headlights slicing through the storm. For a fleeting second, the stained glass portrait of Harold seemed to nod as if telling me to keep moving. A few days later, the rain had passed, though the skies still hung gray. I stood in a small loft downtown, its brick walls raw and cold, pipes jutting overhead. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine. When I opened the crate of books, one spine caught my eye, Principles of Legacy. It felt oddly swollen. I tugged it open, and from its pages slid a folded letter in an unmarked envelope. My breath caught as I broke the seal. Harold's handwriting was shaky yet firm. "The will protects those who protect others. If you are cast aside, seek out Sophia Grant. The right road will never leave you alone." Relief crashed through me. Harold hadn't abandoned me. He had expected this moment. That night, I listed the pocket watch for sale. I watched the second hand make its last turn before I set it down. It was no longer a gift, only a chain I was finally breaking. The next morning, I met Daniel at a quiet cafe tucked between art galleries. We sat at a battered wooden table while the coffee press hissed in the background. I told him everything: Victor's words, Harold's letter, and my exile. Daniel listened, his jaw tight, then asked a question that sank into me like a stone in water. "Do you want revenge? Or do you want to build something that lasts?" I understood then. Harold Mercer hadn't raised me to chase revenge. He had shaped me for something larger, to guard what mattered most. I told Daniel my plan. I would keep Harold's letters safe, seek out Sophia Grant, and prepare to defend myself no matter how hard Victor Mercer tried to smear me. Daniel leaned back, thoughtful. "Don't crawl through shadows," he said. "Bring it all into the light. Fairmont remembers your grandfather's heart." That night, the phone buzzed. Rosa's voice was faint under static. Victor had locked the study room and changed the doors on Harold's office. He was cataloging everything, but she had managed to scan certain pages. "I'll send them," she whispered. "And watch his contractor. He's planning something." My throat tightened. She was risking everything to warn me. When the courier arrived, I tore open the package. Inside was a copy of a handwritten addendum. The words circled in bold ink stopped me cold. "The trust opens only when two push together. 2 keys. 2 signatures." Did that mean Victor couldn't touch the fortune without me? I pinned the letter beside Harold's note on my wall. Across 3 columns I scrawled, "Sophia, legal, public, community project, cultural center, mission." I switched off the light, the glow of a gallery sign outside scattering red and blue shadows across my desk. Tomorrow, I promised myself, I would call Sophia. But one question gnawed at me. What exactly did 2 pushed together mean? And why did I fear the other half was my father? The next morning, I sat across from Sophia Grant in her glass office overlooking the Ironwood Hills. The air smelled faintly of cedar polish, the kind of place where truth left marks. She slid a folder with Harold's seal across the steel table. "Your grandfather built a dual signature clause," she explained, voice calm and precise. "Every cent of the $420 million fund for the Riverbend Heritage Center requires your approval and Victor's. Neither of you can move the money alone." The words landed heavy. I scanned the underlined section. Then another condition caught my eye. If conflict between co-executors spilled into public view within the first year, the fund split on its own, half to Fairmont Charities, half directly to me. Victor would get nothing. Before I could speak, the table screen lit up. Victor appeared from his whiskey-lined office in the Mercer estate, jaw tight but voice smooth. "This is nonsense," he snapped. Sophia didn't blink. "Section 7.2, Mr. Mercer. Contest this publicly and the clause executes itself. Reporters will flood your gates by morning." I watched his arrogant grin slip into panic. He tried to sound commanding. "Then I'll fight it in court." "By filing, you'd trigger the very clause that strips you of control," Sophia replied, her tone like a scalpel. The elegance of Harold's design sank in. He had forced Victor into the one role he could never play, partner. Sophia tapped another page. "Note the timing. The successor had to present himself within 3 days of the funeral. You barely made it, Julian. That was deliberate. Harold wanted proof you claimed this path on your own." Calm washed over me. This wasn't a chance. It was a test, and I had passed. My hand shook. As I signed the acknowledgement, the ink bleeding slightly into the page. "Remember," Sophia said firmly, "this authority isn't for ego. It's to protect the people Harold devoted himself to. Don't let anyone twist it into mud." My phone buzzed again as I stood to leave. Rosa's urgent voice filled my ear. "Victor's moving already. He's working with that contractor Harold flagged years ago, building layers of shell companies. Look at the 3rd subsidiary." I pressed the phone tight, staring out at the Ironwood Hills. The fight was no longer about inheritance on paper. It was about the lifeblood of a vision meant for the city. A week later, my loft walls were plastered with notes, maps, and highlighted documents. Neon from the gallery outside flickered against them, throwing restless colors across the paper. Every trail circled back to one name, Summit Crest Builders. Harold had scrawled his warning across it in red. Now Victor was pushing them to the forefront. That evening, the door swung open without warning. Victor stepped into the loft like he still owned the ground I stood on. Victor stood in my loft as if he had never lost control of me. A faint smile curved on his face, the polished kind he wore at charity dinners. He rested a hand on my chair. "Family is family, Julian," he said smoothly. "Why drag this out? Sign the contracts. I'll cover your living costs. You won't have to work a day in your life." His tailored suit, his calculated charm, it was all an attempt to pull me back under. I met his gaze. "I'm not here to live off your payroll. Open the books. Show every contract, every dollar, to the public." The smile froze. For the first time, he looked at me not as a son to belittle, but as an obstacle in his way. 2 days later, we faced each other across a gleaming table inside his attorney's conference room. The contract with Summit Crest Builders sat in the center. His lawyer, sharp glasses catching the light, pushed it toward me. "Route, and paperwork," the man said flatly. "You're young. You don't know how these things work." I skimmed through inflated costs and vague subcontractors, the pages reeking of manipulation. Sliding it back, I said, "Independent audit, line by line." The attorney sneered. "This is how you repay your father? By dragging his name through the mud?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Rosa had sent me a scan of Harold's notes. His heavy pen strokes slashed through the name Summit Crest Builders with 3 words, "Not to be trusted." I printed it and pushed it across the table. "Harold warned me about this exact firm. He saw you coming, Victor." Silence gripped the room. Even his attorney shifted uncomfortably. For once, Victor had no words. The next morning, he struck back in the press. A column appeared. "Mercer Air sabotages community project for personal gain." At cafes, whispers trailed me. At markets, people stared longer than usual. He was poisoning the air, painting me as selfish. The walls felt like they were closing in until Daniel stepped in. He published an essay on his design blog. "Transparency is not obstruction. Julian Mercer is safeguarding the standards this community deserves." It spread quickly through Fairmont's artists and shopkeepers. People began asking whether Victor's version of events was the full story. That evening, I drove to the construction site by Greenwood Lake. Steel frames jutted upward like broken ribs, cranes groaning overhead. I stood on the dirt, listening to the river rush in the distance, reminding myself I had to hold my ground. As I turned to leave, my phone rang. A voice I didn't recognize whispered, low and deliberate, "He won't stop with contracts or headlines. Dirtier methods are coming. Watch yourself." Then the line went dead. I stood in the shadows of half-built walls, realizing the real battle hadn't begun yet. Weeks passed since Harold's funeral. By then I had learned to keep my phone close, my responses sharper. Victor no longer hid behind quiet maneuvers. He wanted to crush me under public scrutiny, and the first stage was the Municipal Hall of Fairmont. The town council chamber was packed with reporters, leaders, and curious citizens. Cameras lined the aisles, trained on Victor at the podium. His silver hair glowed under the harsh lights, his confidence dripping from every word. "Progress is stalled," he declared, voice booming. "And it's stalled because my son is obsessed with power. The community suffers while he blocks the future." My pulse hammered as I rose from the second row. The folder in my hands was worn from nights of unfolding Harold's letter. "My grandfather left me these words," I said, steadying my voice. "Protect others first. That is the principle guiding me. This project is not for exploitation. It belongs to Fairmont, and I will defend it with everything I have." Pens scratched. Cameras flashed. For the first time, Victor's certainty flickered. But his sabotage wasn't limited to speeches. At the lakeside site, Daniel and I discovered shipments of glass panels hidden under tarps. They looked identical to the approved kind, but closer inspection showed they were brittle, ready to shatter in winter. The paperwork tied them straight to Victor's signature. We brought the evidence to Sophia Grant, who moved fast, filing an injunction that blocked Summit Crest and replaced them with a local supplier Harold had once trusted. Word spread quickly. Victor's son had prevented a dangerous shortcut. To rebuild trust beyond paperwork, I organized a community event by the lake. Children painted murals on temporary walls destined for the new center. Their laughter and bright colors drowned out every poisonous headline. Soon after, the local paper ran, "Julian Mercer carries S. Harold's torch." For the first time, strangers nodded to me in coffee shops instead of glaring. Victor appeared at the site not long after, his shoes sinking into the damp ground. His voice was low, his eyes like stone. "You think you've won a round, but this is only the beginning." I didn't look away. For once, I didn't flinch. That night, an official envelope arrived. The town council had ordered monthly oversight sessions, open to the public and the press. Every decision, every contract, every misstep would be displayed in the light. I knew immediately what it meant. The fight had moved to a stage Victor could no longer fully control. It would either expose him, or it would destroy me. By late autumn, the Riverbend Heritage Center was nearly finished. Its glass walls caught the pale sun, reflecting the jagged ridges of the Ironwood Hills. The final oversight hearing was held inside the Municipal Hall of Fairmont, and the air inside the town council chamber felt charged, as if the entire community held its breath. Victor entered in a perfectly pressed suit, clutching a folder like it carried sacred truth. When his turn came, he spread the papers across the desk. "My son," he declared, "has siphoned money from this project for himself." Gasps rippled through the crowd as the projector flashed documents with my forged signature. For a moment, the floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Then Sophia Grant rose. Calm, surgical. "These files are forgeries," she said. She displayed Harold's archived originals side by side with the fakes. The differences under the magnifier were undeniable. The room erupted. Reporters scrambling for notes, citizens whispering fiercely. Victor's face turned crimson. Cornered, he tried to shift. "I'm not here to fight my son," he insisted, pretending to sound humble. "I only want this center to be complete. He's the one who wants control." Doubt flickered across a few faces until Daniel stepped forward. He held 2 glass samples to the overhead lights. One panel brittle and unsafe, the other strong and certified. "This," he said, "is the glass Victor Mercer pushed. This is what Harold chose." Cameras clicked wildly as he explained the danger of cheap substitutions. Victor's composure cracked. His voice rose, accusations spilling into the microphones. His fury filled the chamber, exactly the public eruption Harold had predicted. For the first time, everyone saw the imbalance clearly. When the council adjourned, their ruling was blunt. The project would continue under strict public supervision, and Victor's outburst would be recorded for history. Outside, the winter air stung as reporters pressed for comments, but I could feel momentum shifting. By the winter month, the center stood ready. Its wide glass reflected blue sky and bright sunlight, the plaza alive with artists setting up easels, food stalls trailing smoke, and music winding through the cold air. Fairmont had gathered in full. I waited backstage, palms damp, Harold's words steady in my mind. True wealth is measured by how much it uplifts the forgotten. The city official finished his welcome, but before I stepped forward, Victor pushed past me, seizing the microphone with a showman's ease. "This," he thundered, "is the Mercer family's legacy. Years of sacrifice brought us here." The crowd gave only tepid applause, faces tight with unease. They sensed the hollowness. Beside me, Sophia whispered, "If he denies your role, I'll read the clause aloud. He knows the cost." Victor caught her gaze, and for an instant fear crossed his face. Still, he clung to the mic. I stepped forward, not to snatch it away, but to stand at his side. My voice carried over his. This day isn't about one person. Harold Mercer believed wealth has meaning only when its strength ends the community. That belief stands here in glass and stone. This time the applause was thunderous, real, rolling across the plaza. Cameras flashed. Victor lowered the mic, suddenly small under the sunlight. When the moment came, I lifted the brass ceremonial shears. Beside me stood Daniel and a line of children whose paint-stained hands held the ribbon. Victor sat rigid in the front row, pale with rage, while the crowd roared as the ribbon fell. Light spilled across the murals the children had painted, spreading like a blessing over the plaza. The next morning's headline read, "Julian Mercer, Guardian of Harold's Legacy." The echoes of that day lingered across Fairmont. During the first local showcase, Daniel's work filled the halls, joined by pieces from neighborhood artists. Pine wreaths lined the windows, their scent mingling with laughter and music. Victor was absent. His name, however, filled the papers again, only now alongside words like forgery, sabotage, disgrace. His inheritance remained intact, but the respect he craved had slipped away, the community's silence delivering a harsher verdict than any court. Legal matters closed soon after. Under Harold's will, 3 properties passed to me: the mountain lodge where I once sought refuge, a downtown apartment, and the stretch of land along Greenwood Lake where the Heritage Center now stood. They were more than deeds. They were proof that my independence had finally been built into something solid. The properties Harold left me weren't just pieces of land, they were proof that my independence was finally real. At the center's first showcase, a young girl tugged my sleeve and handed me a drawing of Harold and me standing by the lake, the new glass building shining behind us. For a moment, I felt Harold's presence, as if he were still guiding me. Later that night, Rosa led me into the office and pulled out an envelope hidden in Harold's desk. His handwriting filled the page. "If you're reading this, it means you've protected more people than your father ever could. That is the greatest victory I could ask of you." I stepped outside and looked at the center glowing over Greenwood Lake. "You called me worthless," I whispered into the dark. But from that worthlessness, I found freedom. Victor, however, didn't disappear. He started bribing city officials, trying to erase Harold's and my name from the project. At first, I stayed silent, but when a council member told me about his bribes, I knew silence was no longer an option. Sophia brought evidence, fake letters, sworn statements, all tied to Victor. I could have destroyed him in court, but Harold's words echoed in my mind. Strength lies not in striking back, but in what you protect. So I let the truth speak for itself. Within days, headlines exposed Victor's corruption. Pictures of him storming out of meetings filled the papers. Contractors refused his calls. His reputation collapsed. One evening, I saw him alone on the dock of the Silver Bend River, shoulders slumped, reflection broken in the water. He no longer looked like the tyrant I feared, only a man crushed by his own hunger. For the first time, I walked past him without fear. By the new year, the center had become the heart of Fairmont. Daniel curated the first major exhibition, filling the halls with painters, musicians, and sculptors. Children ran through the gallery, sleeves stained with paint, laughter echoing off the glass walls. At the entrance, another child gave me a small sketchbook. On the first page, in shaky letters, she had written, "Keep the light alive." I hugged her gently, realizing something profound. Harold's legacy was no longer mine alone to carry. It belonged to the community he loved, and they had already made it their own. The legacy was already moving forward, alive in the hands of the next generation. Later, Bedpamo night, Rosa found me in the center office. She carried another envelope, this one pulled from the back of Harold's old desk. My hands shook as I opened it. His handwriting flowed across the page. "If you are reading this, you have already done more than I dreamed. You chose to protect people, not wealth. That is the victory our family needed. Do not waste your life hating your father. Let him carry that burden alone. You, my boy, are free." Tears blurred the words. I folded the letter carefully, holding it against my chest before stepping back into the gallery. Music filled the halls, laughter lifted to the high glass ceiling, and the windows shone bright against the winter night. Daniel caught my eye and raised a glass. Across the room, Sophia smiled. The community moved as one, and for the first time in years, I felt something I thought I'd lost: belonging. When the celebration wound down, I slipped out to the terrace. Greenwood Lake stretched before me, its black surface reflecting the golden lights of the center. I opened my journal and wrote a single line. "Victor still has his fortune, but I have a community that believes in me, and that is wealth no one can steal." I closed the book and breathed in the crisp night air. Behind me, music and voices lingered, proof that Harold's vision lived on. Ahead of me, lanterns lit the path curving along the water, each step carrying me farther from Victor's shadow and deeper into the light of my own making. I no longer bore the Mercer name as a burden. I carried it as a promise. The story you've just walked through isn't only about inheritance or the clash between father and son. It's about something far deeper, the choice between repeating the darkness we inherit or breaking free to build something better. Julian discovered that true legacy isn't measured in dollars or deeds, but in the lives we lift, the voices we protect, and the communities that rise stronger because one person stood firm. Victor's hunger left him alone. Julian's decision to protect rather than retaliate gave him what no money can buy: trust, belonging, and freedom. The center by the lake became more than glass and stone. It became Harold's vision made real, a reminder that light always finds a way to break through shadows. And now I want to leave you with a question. What are you protecting in your own life? What legacy will you leave behind? It doesn't need to be grand or public. Even the smallest act of courage, kindness, or truth can ripple farther than we imagine. If this story struck something inside you, if you saw pieces of your own journey in these struggles and triumphs, then stay close. Subscribe now and join me again as we step into new stories of betrayal, resilience, and redemption. Each one carries a chance to reflect, to heal, and to step closer to the legacy you're meant to leave.